The first thing I do every morning is make my bed. The corners must be perfect. 45-degree angles, crisp enough to slice paper. The blanket pulled so taut you could bounce a quarter off it. It's a ritual, a small controllable act of order in a world that spun out of my control a long time ago. It's the first thing they teach you. Control your space. Control yourself. The rest is just noise. For 10 years, that noise was the whine of a C-130, the crackle of comms, the distant percussive cough of a mortar. Now it's the whisper of the climate control in my penthouse and the gentle hum of the city of Oak Haven waking 20 stories below. The noise has changed. The need for control has not. My space now is minimalist, almost sterile. Polished concrete, floors, slate gray walls, furniture that is more about function than comfort. There's only one object in the entire apartment that holds any warmth. On the wall opposite my desk, in a simple dark wood frame, is a photograph. It's old, faded from the sun of 1,000 forgotten afternoons. A small white house with blue shutters and a sprawling oak tree in the front yard. A tire swing, hanging from a thick branch, is blurred in mid-motion. My father is on the porch, his face crinkled in a smile. My mother is tending to her rosebush, her back to the camera. And a small, gap-toothed version of me is on that swing, legs pumping. Flying toward the sky, our house. 347 Chestnut Lane. It doesn't exist anymore. The house, the tree, the roses, all of it gone. Level to make way for something bigger, newer. Something with a 2-car garage and a composite deck. Something my sister Chloe called an upgrade. I remember the moment I found out. Not in an office overlooking the city, but in a plywood box in the middle of the Kandahar desert. The air was a blast furnace, thick with dust that tasted of sand and sorrow. The internet connection was a fragile thread back to a world I wasn't sure I belonged to anymore. An email from her. The subject line was, "Some news from home." Cheerful, bubbly, just like Chloe. The first few paragraphs were filled with trivialities. The weather, a new restaurant she and her boyfriend Darren had tried. Then the casual detonation. And with the market being so crazy, we decided it was the perfect time to sell Mom and Dad's place. It was just falling apart, Eli. You know how it was. We got a great price, and it means Darren and I can finally afford a starter home in a better neighborhood. I know you love the old place, but it was time to move on. It's just a house after all. It's just a house. I read the line over and over, the words blurring. The plywood walls of the communications tent seemed to shrink. The air getting hotter, thicker. Outside, a sergeant was yelling for us to saddle up. Another patrol. Another mission. But in that moment, the war outside meant nothing. A different kind of war had just begun inside me. I felt the foundations of my own life turn to dust. That house wasn't just wood and nails. It was the place Mom and Dad brought me home from. The hospital. It was the yard where I learned to throw a baseball. It was the kitchen where we'd gathered, numb with grief, after their funeral. It was the last tangible piece of them I had left in the world. And she had sold it. For a down payment, I closed the laptop, went on my patrol, and did my job. I did my job for 6 more years after that day. I re-enlisted twice. Because the noise of the war was easier to bear than the silence of a home that no longer existed. Oak Haven wasn't my home anymore. I had nothing to go back to. So I stayed where I was. I learned logistics. I learned to manage supply chains in the most hostile environments on Earth. I learned how to move men and materials through chaos. I learned how to be patient, how to plan, and I saved my money. Every last cent. When I finally came home, I didn't come home to Chestnut Lane. I came home to a city I barely recognized. With a mission of my own, a quiet mission. A patient one. My morning routine continues. Bed made. A black coffee, no sugar. Then my desk. The surface is a wide expanse of polished oak. On it sits a single high-resolution monitor. I bring it to life. It doesn't display stock tickers or news feeds. It displays a map, a detailed satellite view of a single suburban block. Sycamore Terrace, a quiet, tree-lined street about 5 miles from the rubble of my childhood. A street of well-manicured lawns, new SUVs in the driveways, and happy families. The better neighborhood Chloe had wanted so badly, and right in the middle of it, number 114, is her house. Her perfect starter home, bigger than ours ever, was beige siding, tasteful gray shutters, a Japanese maple in the front yard. I know every detail. I've studied it like a Target package. Over the last 2 years, I have been acquiring the properties around her, one by one, quietly, through a series of shell corporations with Adine names like Midwest Holdings and Oak Haven Development Group. I make offers they can't refuse. 20-30% above market value, all cash, quick closing. People talk about the mysterious company buying up Sycamore Terrace. They think it's some big developer from out of state, planning to level the block for high-rise condos. The fear and greed are potent motivators. The for sale signs go up. The families move out. The houses sit empty, owned by me. The map on my screen is color-coded, green for the properties I own. There are 8 green parcels. They form a near-perfect horseshoe around a single red one. Number 114. There is one other property, a yellow one. Number 120 at the end of the block, the last piece of the puzzle. Once it turns green, the board will be set. My phone buzzes. A single name on the screen, Marcus. I answer, Sarge. Morning. Eli. His voice booms, as warm and steady as it was the day he pulled me out of a collapsed building in Fallujah. Just wanted to confirm. The offer on the Peterson place was accepted. They're signing the papers this afternoon. As of 3 p.m. today, you own another slice of suburbia. Good, I say. That's another house adjacent to Chloe's. One step closer. That makes 7, Sarge says. I can hear the unspoken question in his voice. He's the only person on earth who knows what I'm doing. He's my lawyer, my wealth manager, and the closest thing I have to a friend. He set up the corporations. He handles the transactions. He also thinks I'm running a campaign fueled by grief and rage. He's not wrong. You ever gonna tell me what the end game is here, son? Once you own the whole damn block, then what? You gonna build a moat? Put up a watchtower? Just securing a perimeter, Sarge, I say, my voice flat. He sighs. He knows not to push. All right. Well, there's one loose end. The Henderson property. Number 120. They're not biting. I've had the realtor approach them 3 times. The last offer was 40% over market value. They won't even consider it. Why not? They've lived there for 50 years, raised their kids there. They're not interested in money. They're interested in dying in their own bed. You can't put a price on that. A complication. I stare at the single yellow square on my map, an island of resistance. Send me their file, I say. Everything you have on them. Eli, maybe you should leave these folks alone. They're just an old couple. They're a strategic objective, Marcus, I reply, the words coming out colder than I intended. Send me the file. He's silent for a moment. Copy that, he says finally, the old military cadence returning to his voice. File incoming, Thorn out. He hangs up before I can. He only calls me by my last name when he thinks I'm crossing a line. I lean back in my chair, my eyes fixed on the photograph of the little white house with blue shutters. It's just a house. The words echo, a cold whisper in the quiet of my expensive, empty apartment. Chloe never understood. It was never about the wood or the nails. It was about the soil, the roots. The one place on earth that was supposed to be waiting for me, she took my past. So I'm going to buy her future. The drive to Sycamore Terrace is one I've made 100 times, always at night. I park my car, a restored '69 Charger, a relic of an era when things were built to last, at the end of the street, and just watch. The block is quieter now. Many of the houses are dark, their windows like vacant eyes. My houses, the streetlights cast long shadows, making the familiar suburban landscape feel alien theatrical. A stage waiting for the final act at our house. Number 114 is ablaze with light. It's a beacon of cheerful domesticity in the growing quiet. I can see their silhouettes through the large picture window. Chloe, moving around the kitchen. Her husband Darren on the couch, his face illuminated by the glow of a screen. They look happy, content. The image should fill me with rage. Instead, it just feels hollow. A deep, aching emptiness where a family used to be. Chloe, my little sister. I remember trailing after her on that tire swing, pushing her until she shrieked with laughter. I remember teaching her how to ride a bike on this very street's predecessor, her small hand gripping mine in terror and trust. Where did that girl go? When did she trade our shared history for this? For beige siding and a man who always looked at our old house like it was something to be embarrassed by. Darren. I never liked him. He was a real estate agent with teeth too white and a handshake that was always a little too damp. He smelled of ambition and cheap cologne. When he looked at our home, he didn't see the pencil marks on the doorframe marking our heights, or the spot on the floor where Dad had dropped a can of paint. He saw property value. He saw a teardown. He was the one who whispered in her ear. Unsure of it, he was the serpent in our forgotten Eden. I watch as Darren gets up and joins her in the kitchen. He puts his arms around her waist. She leans her head back on his shoulder. A perfect couple in their perfect house on their perfect street. A street that is slowly, inexorably becoming mine. My focus shifts to the end of the block. Number 120, the Henderson House. It's smaller than the others, a single-story ranch, but the garden is immaculate. Even in the dark, I can see the neat rows of flowers, the carefully pruned shrubs. A light is on in the living room. The file Sarge sent me is on the passenger seat. Arthur and Eleanor Henderson, ages 82 and 79, married for 55 years. They bought the house in 1975, paid it off in 1998. Their roots are deeper than anyone's on this street. Deeper than Chloe's. Almost as deep as mine used to be. My strategy of overwhelming financial force is useless here. These people aren't a line item on a spreadsheet. They are a life. A life lived in one place, a concept my sister found so easy to discard. The irony is a bitter pill. To complete my revenge, I have to do to this couple the very thing that was done to me. Convince them to leave their home. The thought sits uneasily in my gut. For 2 years, this campaign has been clean, impersonal, fought through shell corporations and real estate agents. It was about numbers and deeds, not faces, but the Hendersons have a face. And it looks a lot like the life I lost. I start the Charger, its engine a low, rumbling growl that cuts through the suburban quiet. As I pull away, a light on the second floor of Chloe's house turns on, her bedroom. For a fleeting moment, I wonder if she ever thinks about me, if she ever feels a pang of guilt, or if she truly believes the words she wrote to me all those years ago, that it was just a house, that it was time to move on. A week passes. The contracts are finalized on the Peterson place. The horseshoe around Chloe's house is complete. The map on my monitor is a sea of green, save for 2 spots. Her red square and the Hendersons' yellow one. The situation remains static. Sarge calls to tell me the Hendersons have put a sign in their yard, not a for sale sign, a small, hand-painted one. It reads, "We're not moving," a quiet act of defiance. A message meant for the faceless corporation trying to buy them out. A message meant for me. It's a direct challenge to my strategy, an unexpected variable. The military man in me sees it as an obstacle to be overcome. The plan is the plan. Adapt, improvise, overcome, find their weakness. Every target has one, but the part of me that still remembers the tire swing and the smell of Mom's roses hesitates. I decide to do something I haven't done yet. Reconnaissance. On foot. I dress not in the expensive, minimalist clothes of Elias Thorne, the logistics magnate, but in the worn jeans and faded work shirt of someone who belongs in a place like this. I drive to a nearby park and walk the rest of the way. It's a Saturday afternoon. The sun is bright, the air filled with the sound of lawnmowers and distant children's laughter. Walking down Sycamore Terrace feels like walking through a ghost town of my own making. The houses I own are pristine but lifeless. The lawns are cut by a service I employ. The windows are dark. They are perfectly maintained shelves waiting. Then I get to her block, number 114. Chloe is in the front yard, gardening, just like Mom used to. She wears expensive athletic gear and a wide-brimmed sun hat. She has a line of sweat on her brow. She looks happy. She doesn't see me. I'm just a man walking down the street. I keep my head down, my pace steady. The proximity to her is a physical shock, a jolt of ice and fire. My heart rate quickens. My hands clench into fists in my pockets. So easy, she's right there. I could walk up to her, say her name. What would she do? What would I don't stop. I keep walking all the way to the end of the block, to number 120. The little hand-painted sign is there, staked proudly in the lawn next to a bird bath. The front door of the house is open, a screen door in its place. I can hear the sound of a television, a game show host's excited chatter. As I slow my pace, an old man emerges from the side of the house, carrying a pair of gardening shears. Arthur Henderson. He's stooped, his hands gnarled with arthritis, but his eyes are clear. He sees me looking at his house. He stops. I stop. We're 20 feet apart. Can I help you? He asks. His voice is raspy, but not unkind. He's not suspicious. He's just a man in his yard. This is my chance to lie. To be a surveyor, a city planner, someone with a reason to be looking so intently at his property. But the words die in my throat. I look at his house, at the worn welcome mat, at the lawn that has been mowed by the same man for 50 years, and I see my own past reflected back at me. "No, sir," I say, my voice rough. "I'm sorry, I was just admiring your garden." His face softens. A small smile touches his lips. Ah, the wife's pride and joy. Eleanor. She's the one with the green thumb. I'm just the hired muscle. He snips at a stray branch on a hedge. "You live around here?" "A long time ago," I say, the truth slipping out before I can stop it. "I grew up not far from here." "It's a good place to grow up," he says, nodding. "Changing, though. All these houses going up for sale. Some big company buying. Them all. Don't know what they're planning, but it's got the wife worried." He looks at me, his gaze shrewd. "You're not with them, are you?" I should say yes. I should use this opening. But I can't. The lie is too grotesque, too close to the bone. "No, sir," I say. "I'm not with them." He seems to accept this. He turns his attention back to his hedge. "Well, good. Some things shouldn't be for sale." He says it so simply, with such conviction. It's a statement of fact, not an accusation. But it hits me with the force of a physical blow. Some things shouldn't be for sale. I stand there for a moment longer. A stranger on a street I am systematically dismantling. The old man continues his work, content in his small kingdom. In that moment, He has more power than I do, with all my money and all my righteous anger. He has a home. I turn and walk away, the game show laughter fading behind me. My mission, which had seemed so clear, so pure in its objective, is now hopelessly compromised. I had set out to reclaim a piece of my past by controlling the present, but I had forgotten that the present is filled with people, and some of them have roots you can't just buy. My Cold War had just found its first civilian casualty, and I wasn't sure if I had what it took to pull the trigger. The drive back from Sycamore Terrace was a silent one. The rumble of the Chargers engine felt like a discordant note in the symphony of my own thoughts. Arthur Henderson's words echoed in the space where my battle plan used to be. Some things shouldn't be for sale. It was the purest truth I had heard in a decade, and it had come from the one person standing in the way of my objective. The irony was a blade twisting in my gut. I was waging a war of righteous vengeance for a home that was stolen from me, and to win, I was on the verge of stealing one from someone else. The moral high ground, which had felt so firm beneath my feet, was crumbling into a swamp. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't turn on the map. I didn't review the deeds. I walked to the window and stared down at the lights of Oak Haven, the city that held both my oldest memories and my newest ambitions. The anger that had been my fuel for so long felt diluted, contaminated by a dose of humanity I hadn't accounted for. I called Sarge. He picked up on the first ring. The Hendersons are a no-go. I said without preamble. I told you, Eli, he said, his voice gentle. He wasn't gloating. They're not sellers. They're lifers. What's the new plan? That's the problem, I admitted, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. I don't have one. I told him about the conversation, about the hand-painted sign, the look in the old man's eyes, the simple, devastating conviction in his voice. I didn't often articulate the why of my mission, even to Sarge, but I did then. He said he grew up there. That it was a good place to grow up, I recounted, my voice low. And I stood there, a ghost on his street, and I knew exactly what he meant. He was describing my life, Sarge, the one I lost. How can I take that from him? What does that make? Me? It makes you a man, Eli, not a machine, Sarge said quietly. It makes you the guy I served with, the one who ran back for morals, not the cold bastard who's been buying up real estate like he's playing a video game. Maybe this is a good thing. Maybe it's time to rethink the mission. I can't stop, I said, the words a raw reflex. The thought of abandoning the plan felt like a betrayal of my own pain. It would mean Chloe wins. It would mean what? She did was okay. I won't. So what are you gonna do? Harass an old man until he gives in. A new idea began to form, coalescing out of the messy conflict in my head. The objective wasn't the Hendersons. They were just a roadblock. The target was Chloe. I had been focused on a strategy of silent encirclement, of quiet acquisition. It was time to change tactics. If I couldn't remove the last obstacle, I would simply make the target's position untenable. No, I said to Sarge, a new coldness creeping into my voice. I'm not going to harass the Hendersons. I'm going to renovate. Sarge was silent for a beat. Renovate? I own 7 properties on that block. 6 of them are contiguous with my sister's lot line, I explained, walking over to the monitor and finally turning it on. And that glowed, the green horseshoe a silent threat. They're all empty. It's time I started acting like a developer. A very loud, very inconvenient developer. Oh, hell, Sarge muttered. You're going to start a psychological operation. You called it a game? I said, my eyes tracing the property lines that boxed in Chloe's perfect little world. I'm just changing how I play. Send a notice to all residents of Sycamore Terrace. A letter from the Oak Haven Development Group. Inform them that a multi-property renovation and landscaping project is set to begin immediately. Apologize in advance for any noise or inconvenience. And the Hendersons? The letter will specifically mention that the project will be engineered to cause minimal disruption to their property at number 120. Out of respect for long-term residents, they're not my target. I want them to be able to sit in their garden. In peace, I paused, while a jackhammer is tearing up the driveway next door to my sister. Sarge was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was laced with a reluctant admiration. That's a special kind of evil thorn. I'll draft the letter. The first trucks arrived on a Monday morning at 7 a.m. sharp. I was there, parked 2 blocks away, watching through a pair of high-powered binoculars. The sun was just starting to burn the morning mist off the manicured lawns of Sycamore Terrace. It was peaceful, quiet. Then a convoy of heavy-duty vehicles, a cement mixer, a flatbed. Carrying a backhoe, 3 large work vans rumbled onto the street. They all bore the logo of a construction company I'd hired, a company known for efficiency, not subtlety. I watched Chloe's front door open. She stepped out in a silk bathrobe to get her morning paper, a vision of suburban tranquility. She stopped dead when she saw the army of vehicles descending on the house to her left. Her face was a perfect mask of confused annoyance. Darren came out a moment later, knotting the tie on his own robe. I could imagine their conversation. What's all this? Who are they? They can't just block the street. They stood there, 2 perfect little figurines in a snow globe that was about to be violently shaken. The backhoe was unloaded. With a roar of diesel and a screech of hydraulics, it began to tear up the driveway of the house next to theirs. The sound was glorious. A symphony of disruption. I watched Chloe flinch. She put her hands over her ears. This was just the overture. For the next 2 weeks, I orchestrated a campaign of perfectly legal, soul-crushingly annoying construction. Work started at 7 a.m. and ended precisely at 6 p.m., adhering to all city ordinances. I had crews digging up foundations for non-existent extensions. I had roofers tearing off perfectly good shingles. I had a team of landscape architects walking the properties, their voices carrying as they discussed regrading the entire drainage system, a phrase designed to strike fear into the heart of any homeowner. The noise was constant. The beeping of trucks backing up, the roar of machinery, the shouting of workers. The dust coated everything, including the Japanese maple enclosed yard. I had a privacy fence erected around the properties on both sides of hers. A 6-foot-tall wooden wall that blocked out the morning sun and made her perfect house feel like it was at the bottom of a canyon. I watched her change. The easy, happy confidence was replaced by a constant, irritable tension. I saw her arguing with Darren in the driveway. He would gesture wildly, trying to placate her. He was a real estate agent. He understood this was, on its face, a good thing. Development meant property values went up, but he couldn't explain the sheer, coordinated intensity of it. No one renovates 7 houses at once. It made no economic sense. My favorite moment came one afternoon when I saw her talking to Eleanor Henderson over the new fence I'd built. Eleanor was peacefully tending her roses in the afternoon sun. Chloe was standing in the shadow of the fence, her face tight with frustration. The noise from the wood chipper grinding up a line of hedges was deafening. Eleanor just smiled, pointed to her ears as if to say, "Can't hear a thing," and went back to her gardening. I had successfully isolated my target, not just physically, but emotionally. She was living on an island of chaos, and her only neighbor was a bastion of peace I had deliberately created. The psychological toll was beginning to show. She was being worn down, but I needed a crack. I needed her to stop being annoyed and start being afraid, It was Darren who gave me the opening. Sarge called me one evening. "We've got a nibble," he said. "Someone's been making inquiries about the Oak Haven Development Group, not just a casual search. A corporate lawyer. He's trying to pierce the corporate veil. See who the principal owners are." "Darren," I said immediately. "That's my bet," Sarge confirmed. "He's probably trying to figure out if he can sue for damages or just trying to get a handle on who's behind this. My firewalls will hold. He'll hit a dozen dead ends in 3 different states. But he's looking. He's spooked." Darren was predictable. He saw this as a financial problem, a threat too. His investment. He couldn't comprehend any other motive. But his digging would unsettle Chloe. It would confirm that this wasn't normal. It was targeted. And when people feel targeted, they start to look for an enemy. They start to look for a face. It was time to give her a glimpse of one. My approach to the Hendersons was different this time. I didn't park down the street. I parked the Charger directly in front of their house in the middle of the afternoon. The car was a statement, a piece of my past sitting boldly in her present. I got out, dressed in a sharp but understated suit, and walked up their front path. The hand-painted sign was still there. I smiled at it. Eleanor Henderson answered the door. She was a small, bird-like woman with kind, intelligent eyes. She looked me up and down. Then her gaze flickered to the Charger parked at the curb. "Mr. Henderson is in the back," she said, her voice polite but weary. "Actually, Mrs. Henderson, it's both of you I'd like to speak with," I said. "My name is Elias Thorne. I represent the company that has been trying to purchase your home." Her posture stiffened. She made to close the door. "Please," I said, holding up a hand. "I'm not here with another offer. I'm here to propose a solution. Maybe it was the car. Maybe it was the fact that I used my real name." She hesitated, then opened the screen door and let me in. Their home smelled of lemon polish and baked bread. It was filled with photographs, with handmade quotes, with a lifetime of accumulated love. It was everything I had lost. I sat with them at their small kitchen table. I laid out my proposal. I didn't lie. I told them my company was redeveloping the street and that their property was the final piece. Then I made them the offer that had been forming in my mind. "I want to buy your house for 50% above its current market value," I began. They both started to shake their heads. And I continued, cutting them off gently. "I want to grant you a lifetime estate. You would live here in your home for the rest of your lives, rent-free. Nothing would change for you. You would just have a very large check in your bank account, and the deed would transfer to my company. You keep the home. I get the property. We both win." They stared at me, dumbfounded. Arthur looked at Eleanor. She looked back at him. They were having a silent conversation that spanned 55 years. "Why?" Arthur finally asked, his voice thick with suspicion. "Why would you do that? It makes no sense from a business perspective." "Because, sir," I said, looking him in the eye, "I grew up in a house I loved very much, and I know what it's like to lose it. I have no wish to inflict that on anyone else. Think of it as a creative business solution." We talked. For another hour, I answered all their questions. I was honest. I was patient. By the time I left, they had agreed. They saw the logic, the compassion in the offer. They saw a way to have their financial security without losing their souls. Sarge would have the paperwork drawn up by the end of the day. As I walked back to my car, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The final piece was in place. My board was set. I glanced over at number 114. The curtains of the upstairs window twitched. She was watching. She had seen my car. She had seen me walk out of the Hendersons' front door. I got into the Charger and started the engine. I found a deep, predatory growl. I didn't drive away immediately. I sat there for a full minute, letting her watch me. letting the questions form in her mind. Who is that man? Why does he have that car? Why was he with the Hendersons? The car. That was the key. Our father had been obsessed with classic muscle cars. He'd had posters in the garage. He'd always talked about the '69 Charger. It was the one he was going to buy and restore when he retired. The one he never got to. Elias's dream car. She would remember. It might take a day, it might take a week, but the memory would surface. The image of this car, parked on her street, driven by a stranger who was methodically boxing her in, would connect with a piece of the past she had tried so hard to bury. As I finally pulled away from the curb, I looked in the rearview mirror. The curtain fell back into place. The trap was set. The ghost she didn't believe in now had a car. And soon, very soon, she would realize he had a name. Her brother's name. The image of the Charger was a splinter in Chloe's mind. At first, it was just a strange detail in a world that had become increasingly strange. A classic car, a handsome, severe-looking man, a meeting with the stubborn old Hendersons who had refused to sell to her husband's company for months. Then a sold sign appeared on their lawn the very next day. Coincidence, it had to be. Darren said so. He was frantic, trying to figure out the legal and financial angles of their predicament. He was obsessed with the Oak Haven development group, spending his evenings on the phone with lawyers, his face a mask of frustration. He saw a hostile corporate takeover of their quiet suburban life. Chloe saw something else. She saw a ghost. The car haunted her. She saw it in her dreams. A low, rumbling threat in the dark. It dredged up memories she hadn't accessed in years, memories coated in the dust of willful forgetting. Their dad, smelling of motor oil and coffee, sitting at the kitchen table, circling pictures and a dog-eared magazine. A younger Elias, his eyes shining, talking endlessly about engine displacements and horsepower. When I get out, Chloe, the first thing I'm doing is buying a '69 Charger. Cherry red, just like the one Dad always wanted. The memory surfaced one night with the force of a physical blow. She sat bolt upright in bed, her heart hammering. It can't be. The thought was so absurd, so monstrous, she almost laughed. Elias, her quiet, serious, and, for all intents and purposes, vanished brother. The one who hadn't answered an email or a phone call in almost a decade. The idea that he was not only back, but was also a millionaire real estate magnate waging a silent, psychological war against her was the stuff of fever dreams. But the splinter was there, and it was digging deeper. The next day, she didn't go. To her yoga class, she went up to the attic. It was filled with the neatly packed boxes of her new life, but in the far corner, under a dusty tarp, were a few boxes she'd taken from Chestnut Lane before the sale. The ones marked keepsakes. She hadn't opened them in 10 years. Her hands trembled as she sliced through the tape. Inside, the smell of old paper and cedar, photo albums, report cards, and a shoebox filled with old letters. She found a stack of them, thin blue airmail envelopes bound with a rubber band. Letters from Elias, from basic training, from his first deployment. She sat on the dusty floor and read them, her brother's neat, disciplined handwriting a voice from the past. He read about the heat, the boredom, the fear. And in one letter, tucked in between descriptions of his squad mates and complaints about the food, was the line she was looking for. Saving up every penny they give me. It's all going into the Charger fund. Dad would get a kick out of that. Don't tell him. I want it to be a surprise when I get home. The letter was dated 2 months before their father's heart attack. The surprise had never happened. Chloe dropped the letter as if it had burned her. It was real. The ghost had a name. The faceless corporation that was turning her dream life into a nightmare of fences and dust and noise was her brother. The brother whose past she had sold for a profit. and he had come back to collect. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She told Darren. He stared at her, his slick confidence finally shattering. He'd been fighting a hostile business negotiation. The realization that he was caught in the crossfire of a deeply personal family blood feud left him pale and speechless. His financial savvy was useless against this kind of enemy. This wasn't about money. This was about blood. What do we do? He whispered, looking out the window at the construction crews, as if they were an invading army. I have to talk. To him, Chloe said, her mind racing. I have to find him, but how? He wasn't in the phone book. He wasn't on social media. Then she remembered another name from the letters, the one Elias mentioned in every other sentence. The one who was always watching his back. Marcus Riley. Sarge, Elias's best friend. The one who had stood beside her at the funeral, his face a grim mask of grief. She remembered him saying he was thinking of going to law school after his tour, a quick search online. Marcus Riley, attorney at law, a small, respected firm downtown, specializing in corporate and real estate law. A chill went down Chloe's spine. Of course. She walked into his office the next day without an appointment. Sarge had aged. He had the same steady presence, but his eyes were harder. He looked at her from across his desk, and she saw no flicker of recognition or warmth. He knew exactly who she was. I need to find my brother, she said, her voice unsteady. I need to find Elias. Sarge leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled. He didn't pretend not to understand. Can't help you, he said, his voice flat. Please, she begged, the desperation rising. You don't understand what's happening. He's destroying my life. Sarge's expression didn't change, but a dangerous light flickered in his eyes. No, ma'am, he said, his voice dropping low and even. You don't understand. You think this is about noise and some fences. You think this is about your life. You destroyed his. You took a boy who had just lost his parents, who was fighting a war halfway around the world, and you ripped the last piece of home out from under him. You sold his memories. You sold his past. And you did it in a cheerful little email. Chloe flinched as if he'd slapped her. He has spent 10 years rebuilding himself from the rubble you left him in. Sarge continued, his voice like granite. So no, I will not tell you where he is. I will not help you. Whatever business you have with Elias Thorne, you can be damn sure he will conduct it on his own terms, at a time and place of his choosing. He stood up. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual clients to attend to. Chloe left his office, her legs shaking. The last door had been slammed in her face. She was trapped. All she could do was go back to her perfect house, now prison, and wait for her brother to make his next move. The call came 3 days later, a blocked number. When she answered, the voice was a ghost from a life she no longer recognized, deeper, colder, but unmistakably his, Chloe. Elias? She breathed, her hand gripping the kitchen counter. Chestnut Lane, he said. Where the house was. Sunset. Be there. She hung up. The drive was the longest of her life. She passed through neighborhoods that had once been familiar, now changed. When she turned onto Chestnut Lane, her breath caught. It was so different. The old, smaller houses were mostly gone, replaced by larger, modern homes. But their lot was still empty, a scar of green grass between. 2 new houses, he was there, standing in the middle of the lot, his back to her. He was broader than she remembered, his posture rigid. He wore a simple jacket and jeans, but he stood as if in full uniform. The setting sun cast his shadow long across the grass. She got out of the car and walked toward him, the overgrown grass brushing against her ankles. The air was thick with the scent of cut lawns and the ghosts of memory. Eli, she said, her voice small. He turned. His face was the same, but different, thinner, harder. The easy smile of her youth was gone, replaced by something cold, and still the scar on his jaw was a pale white line. His eyes were the worst part. They were flat, empty of any emotion she recognized. He looked at her like a stranger. Why? She asked, the question a choked whisper. Why are you doing this? This? He repeated, his voice devoid of inflection. You mean the renovations? I'm a developer. It's what I do. I am improving the neighborhood. Don't, she said, tears welling in her eyes. Don't do this. Don't pretend. I know it's you. The car, the letters. Ah, he said, a flicker of something, not warmth, but something sharp in his eyes. The car. Good. I was hoping you'd remember. He took a step toward her. You want to know why? You, who stood on this ground, who grew up under the same roof, who shared the same parents, have the audacity to ask me why. The house was falling apart. She cried, the old excuses spilling out, flimsy and pathetic even to her own ears. We needed the money. Darren said it was the smart move. You were gone, Eli? We didn't know when you were coming back, if you were coming back. He listened, his expression unchanging, until she had sputtered to a stop. I have a file. He said, his voice dangerously quiet. From the city assessor's office. It details the condition of this house on the day you sold it. There was some weather damage to the roof. A leaky pipe in the basement. Total estimated repairs, $7,000. You sold our home, our history, our parents' legacy for $7,000. He let the number hang in the air. You didn't need the money, Chloe. You wanted it. Darren wanted it. You wanted a bigger house in a better neighborhood. You wanted to erase this place because you were embarrassed by it. By them, by me. He took another step. I was in a war. I saw things, I did things. The only thing that kept me sane, the only thing I held on to, was the thought of this piece of ground. The thought of coming home. And while I was over there trying not to die for a cause I wasn't sure I believed in, you were over here selling my soul for a granite countertop. He pulled a set of documents from his jacket pocket. I own Sycamore Terrace, Chloe. Every house, every lawn, every tree. All of it, except yours. I can keep the construction going for years. I can build a 20-foot wall around your property. I can get zoning variances to build a halfway house next door. I can bleed you dry in legal fees. I can make your perfect life a living hell until the day you are forced to sell me your house for $1 just to escape. He stood before her, the embodiment of her ruin, holding all the power. The tears streamed down her face. She was broken. He had won, but then he did something she didn't expect. He held out the documents to her. 2 sets, but I'm not going to do that, he said, his voice losing some of its hard edge, replaced by a profound, bottomless weariness. I'm tired of fighting, Chloe. I've been fighting for too long. She looked at the papers. They were deeds drawn up by Marcus Riley. That one, he said, pointing to the first, is the deed to your house, number 114 Sycamore Terrace. I'm signing it over to you. The mortgage is paid. It's yours. A gift. She stared at him, uncomprehending. And that one, he said, pointing to the second, is the deed to this lot. 347 Chestnut Lane, our home. He looked around at the empty space. I'm giving that to you, too. I don't understand, she whispered. You do, he said. You're going to make a choice you never gave me. You can keep your new life, the one you built on the ashes of this place. Or you can have this ground, the only thing left of Mom and Dad. You can't have both. I'm giving you 24 hours. You will sign one of these deeds back over to me. The property you give back will be sold, and every penny will be donated to a charity for the families of soldiers killed in action. You have to decide, Chloe. What's more valuable to you? The house you live in, or the home you destroyed? He placed the deeds in her trembling hand. His fingers brushed hers, and for a fleeting instant, he was just her brother again. Then, the moment passed. You have 24 hours to decide which part of you is for sale, he said softly. He turned and walked away, not looking back, leaving her alone on the empty land with the weight of an impossible choice. I sat with Sarge in a quiet bar downtown, a glass of bourbon in my hand. It was the first time I'd had a drink in years. That wasn't about dulling a memory. The 24 hours were up. A courier had delivered an envelope to Sarge's office an hour ago. You gonna open it? He asked, nodding toward the envelope on the bar between us. I shook my head. It doesn't matter which one she chose. He looked at me, a puzzled frown on his face. The hell it doesn't. No, I said, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. It doesn't. The mission was never to own her house. Or this lot. It was to make her understand. To make her feel, just for a second, the loss that I've lived with for 10 years. To make her place a value on what she threw away. Whether she chose to keep her house or this land, she had to lose something. She had to choose. The choice was the point. The choice was the end of the war. The anger was gone. The cold, driving rage that had been my constant companion had evaporated, leaving behind a clean, quiet calm. I felt light. The burden of my own revenge, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying, was lifted. Sarge picked up the envelope and opened it. He slid the deed out and looked at it. A slow smile spread across his face. Well, I'll be damned, he said. He pushed it across the bar to me. It was the deed to 114 Sycamore Terrace. Chloe had given up her perfect house. She had chosen the empty lot. I stared at the paper, a complex mix of emotions washing over me. Surprise, pity, and a tiny, unexpected flicker of hope. Maybe a piece of the girl I grew up with was still in there after all. A few months later, I stood on Chestnut Lane once more. The sound of hammers and saws filled the air. But this time, it wasn't the sound of destruction. It was the sound of creation. A new foundation had been poured. A small, simple house was taking shape. Not a replica of the old one, but something new. Something modest. Something mine. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I wasn't a developer or a soldier. I was just a man standing on his own piece of ground, a cool breeze rustling the leaves of the new oak tree I'd planted in the yard. I was finally, after a decade of fighting in wars both foreign and domestic, home 1 year later. The house on Chestnut Lane was finished. It wasn't a monument to wealth or a fortress of solitude. It was simple, strong. A 2-bedroom bungalow with a wide front porch and dark blue shutters, a quiet nod to a past I had finally made peace with. I had built it with my own hands as much as my money, needing the feel of the wood, the heft of the tools, needing to create something that wasn't a weapon. The new oak tree I'd planted, now a gangly adolescent, swayed in the autumn breeze. I was on the porch, nursing a cold beer, watching the sun dip below the rooftops of the neighborhood. The Charger was in the garage, covered. I didn't drive it much anymore. The ghosts it was meant to summon had been exorcised. Sarge was in the chair opposite me, his feet up on the railing. You know, he said, taking a long pull from his own bottle. For a guy who owned half the city a year ago, you've settled into a boring life pretty damn well. I smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached my eyes. Boring is underrated, Sarge. So what happened to the empire? He asked, though he already knew. I had dismantled it. The 7 houses on Sycamore Terrace, including Chloe's old place, had been sold. Not to a single developer, but to individual families. Young couples, people with kids. I sold them at market value, using the profits to endow the charity I'd threatened Chloe with. My campaign of terror had, in the end, created a neighborhood. The Oakhaven Development Group had vanished as quietly as it appeared. We sat in comfortable silence, a silence I hadn't known for more than a decade. The war was over. The mission was complete. I was just Elias Thorne, a man on his porch in Oakhaven. It was enough. A car I didn't recognize pulled up to the curb. It was a modest, late-model sedan, the kind you don't notice. The driver's side door opened, and a woman got out. It was Chloe. Sarge instinctively put his beer down, his posture straightening into something more protective. I gave a slight shake of my head, and he settled back, his eyes watchful. I hadn't seen her or spoken to her since that day on the empty lot. I only knew through Sarge's legal channels that she had sold the lot on Chestnut Lane a month after. I gave it to her. I never knew what she did with the money, and I never asked. It wasn't my business anymore. She looked different. The expensive, curated perfection was gone. She wore simple jeans and a sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked older, tired, but the frantic, brittle energy she'd had was gone, replaced by a quiet gravity. She walked up the new stone path, her eyes fixed on the house, on me. She stopped at the foot of the porch steps, as if she were standing on the edge of a foreign country. "Elias," she said. Her voice was steady. "Chloe," I replied, my own voice. Even. I didn't stand. I didn't invite her up. I waited. She clutched a small, worn shoebox in her hands. The same one I'd imagined her finding in the attic. I wanted to bring you these. She didn't try to explain or apologize. The time for that was long past. She simply walked up the 3 steps and placed the box on the small table between me and Sarge. She looked at me, her eyes holding a universe of complicated, unspoken things, regret, sorrow, a profound and weary understanding. "Darren left," she said, not as a plea for sympathy, but as a statement of fact. "He said I lost my ambition. He was right." She glanced around at the quiet street. "I have a small apartment across town. I work at the city library. It's quiet." I just nodded, absorbing the information. "I wanted you to have these," she said, again tapping the lid of the box. "They're not mine to keep." She turned to leave. There was no grand scene, no tearful reunion. There was a transaction, a final quiet settling of accounts. But as she reached the bottom of the steps, I found myself speaking. "Chloe," she stopped, her back still to me. "That day," I said, my voice rougher than I intended, "you chose the lot. Why?" She was silent for a long moment, looking at the new house that stood where her choice had been made. "Because you were right," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "It wasn't just a house and ... I guess I thought that if I couldn't have a home, I could at least save the memory of one." She half turned, giving me a small, sad smile. "Goodbye, Eli." She got in her car and drove away, leaving a strange quiet in her wake. Sarge looked at me, then at the box. "You gonna open it?" he asked again. This time, I nodded. I pulled the box toward me and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of tissue paper, were the things I thought were gone forever. The thin blue airmail letters I had sent her, a faded photograph of our parents on their wedding day, our father's military dog tags, and our mother's small silver locket. I picked up the locket. It opened with a familiar click. Inside were 2 tiny postage stamp-sized photos, a serious little boy with a military short haircut, and a gap-toothed little girl with a world of laughter in her eyes. Closed the locket, the cool metal a comfort in my palm. My war of revenge had ended a year ago. But in that moment, sitting on the porch of my new home, holding the last remnants of the old one, I felt a different kind of victory. It wasn't the satisfaction of a battle won. It was the quiet, profound piece of a story finally being made. Whole, Spring arrived on Chestnut Lane not as an event, but as a slow, quiet unfolding. The oak tree, once a fragile sapling, now had a confident spread of new lime green leaves. The flower beds I dug along the porch, which had been filled with my mother's favorite roses, were budding. The scent was a faint, familiar perfume in the cool morning air. I was kneeling in the soft soil, a trowel in my hand, feeling the solid, reliable weight of the earth. The work was meditative. It rooted me. A car door closed gently down the street. I didn't look up immediately. Neighbors came and went. Life on the lane had a rhythm now, a peaceful cadence I had become a part of. But these footsteps were slow, measured, one set accompanied by the soft tap of a cane. I glanced over my shoulder. It was Arthur and Eleanor Henderson, walking arm in arm up my path. Arthur leaning a bit more heavily on his cane than he had. A year ago, had a small basket looped over his arm. I stood, wiping the dirt from my hands onto my jeans, and met them at the steps. "Morning, Arthur, Eleanor." Elias, Eleanor beamed, her eyes crinkling. "We saw you out here turning the soil and didn't want to disturb, but these tomatoes were calling your name." She lifted the basket, which was filled with plump red tomatoes, and a few sprigs of fragrant basil, first of the season from our greenhouse. "You shouldn't have," I said, but I took the basket, the warmth of the sun-ripened fruit seeping into my skin. "Thank you. They look incredible." "It's the least we can do," Arthur said, his voice a gravelly rumble. He leaned on his cane and looked. At the house, then at the garden, then at me. "This place. It looks right. Looks like it belongs here." "I feel like I do," I admitted, the words simple and true. We stood for a moment, 3 neighbors enjoying a fine spring morning. The silence wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. They weren't ghosts from my past or pawns in a long-finished game. They were my friends. "We saw your sister," Eleanor mentioned casually, as if talking about the weather, "at the library last week. She helped me find a book on heirloom roses." She patted my arm gently. "She has a kind way about her, a quiet way." I nodded, absorbing the news. Chloe was okay. She was finding her own quiet way. That was enough to know. I felt no anger, no resentment, only a distant, muted ache that had more to do with the passage of time than with any specific wound. "Well, we won't keep you from your work," Arthur said, tipping a phantom hat. "Just wanted to say hello. Thanks for stopping by," I said. "And for the tomatoes." I watched them walk away, their slow, steady pace a testament to a life lived together. They turned at their drive and waved, and I waved back. I took the basket inside and set it on the kitchen counter. The house was quiet, filled with the clean light of morning. I went back to the porch and sat down in my chair, looking not at the ghosts of the past, but at the living street before me. The sound of a lawnmower started up a few houses down. A group of kids rode by on their bikes, their laughter echoing. The anger had been a fire that burned for 10 years, fueling a mission that consumed my life. It had forged me into a weapon, a ghost, a predator. But fire eventually burns out. And when it does, if you're lucky, the ground is fertile for something new to grow. I looked at the house I had built, the garden I was tending, the neighborhood I was now a part of. I had come back to Oak Haven seeking justice, seeking revenge. I had come back to burn something down, but I had ended up building something instead. Not just a house, but a home. Not just a life, but a place to live it. And in the end, that was a victory far greater than any I had ever planned. The war was over. I had finally truly come home.